We spoke last time of Hatha Yoga, which emphasizes on the physical body and the life force. We concluded on the note that at its best, Hatha Yoga opens the door to Raja Yoga, the yoga of the king, which emphasizes more upon the mind than upon either the life or the body. It is understood that the mind depends for its functioning a good deal upon the life force that is involved in the body. Modern science would have it that it is only the physical body that is activated by the life energy that are the primary truths, and either the mind or the soul, they have no independent existence. Some would even go so far as to say that the mind or the soul is the epiphenomena of matter. They do not explain many things that happen independent of the body and the life force in the activities of the mind. But the ancient psychophysical science of yoga in India has resolved this question of the dependence and also the fact of independence of the mind as far as its relations with the life force and the physical body is concerned. For yogic science recognizes that behind the physical exterior body of which we are conscious and which we see, there is a subtle physical body, what they call the mental or the life body, with which the soul is clothed even when it sheds the physical body. Now this subtle physical body has got its own life force and its own subtle substance. The subtle life force that courses through the subtle physical body runs through a number of centers of concentration of the energy, what are picturesquely called the lotuses. And from the bottom of the subtle physical body, crossing through these various centers, which represent so as to say the convolutions of the subtle energy, the subtle life force shoots up to the height near the head, where is seated the superconscious consciousness. This system of lotuses or wheels as they are called is reproduced in the physical body almost with exact reproductions along the spine in the several ganglionic centers. But remember that these lotuses or wheels of subtle energy, they are not situate in the physical body. They are not attached to the physical spinal column. But they really exist in the subtle physical body, and their action impinges upon the corresponding areas in the physical body along the physical spinal column. It is The aim of these yogic systems to arouse this primal energy in the subtle physical body by exerting pressure upon it. And this pressure is most easily exerted by equalizing the higher breath and the lower breath. When this pressure is exerted for a certain amount of time and concentration, the involved energy, the primal energy, which is likened to a serpent, coiled round itself 3.5 times. It is struck on its hood, as it were, and it rises up, opening the various centers or the lotuses or the wheels of consciousness, opening in the process windows, as it were, to several planes of existence which are connected with each center, till the force rises near the crown of the head, where there is what is called the superconscious self, the divine self. And with this joining of the force from the lowest center to the highest, there issues a shower of bliss, and also a merger of the individual consciousness, human consciousness, with the divine consciousness which has its center there. Naturally, this is an experience which needs to be repeated again and again before it can organize itself in the system and develop into a permanent realization. There is a regular science on the subject which is called the science of Kundalini Yoga, and in it you will be interested to know that the several lotuses, they are so called because to the subtle vision, the figuration of the subtle nerves looks like so many petals of a lotus. They have actually numbered the petals, beginning with 4 petals in the lotus at the spine, at the base of the spine, 6, 8, 12, 16, and 2, and 1,000. 1,000 represents a full plenary figure, not necessarily a numerical 1,000. Now these lotuses are pictured as hanging with their faces down, each one down. As the force strikes it, the lotus turns upward and they remain that way. That represents the opening of the consciousness at that level. So each lotus blossoms till it reaches the top, and when it comes down, lotus by lotus, they again turn downwards and close up. In the normal human system, normal human individual, only a fraction of this subtle energy, subtle pranic force is active, only as much as is necessary to sustain the normal life operations. It is only by yoga that this deeper potential is tapped and various forces are released which break the walls of the limiting physical organization. And the regulation of breath, the exercise of breath, the elongation of breath, what we call pranayama, is the main means adopted in the Raja Yoga towards this end. But it is not the soul means. As a help to this exercise of the breath, there is the use of mantra, the seed syllable, the potent syllable, which is repeated along with the breathing. This evokes certain spiritual vibrations and adds to the effort, adding a spiritual dimension to what would otherwise be a purely psychophysical process. 4. A mantra is a sound body of a divine entity. Each divine reality, a formed reality, has its own sound form, and each mantra is revered as the sound body of that deity. For particular ends, there are particular mantras. And it is laid down that whatever the purpose, the first essential condition is to tap and release into operation the hidden potential. Sri Aurobindo has given a beautiful and graphic description of the process in his book Savitri, which I have noted. Most of you have read Savitri. You remember the scene where, as the date of Satyavan's death draws near, Savitri spends her nights praying to the divine puissance, the divine mother. And one day, in her journey inwards, she comes across her secret soul. And as an aftermath of this discovery of her own soul, she sees the Divine Mother, the divine power which governs the world, which forms the world, descending into her body. She's describing. Sri Aurobindo says, a living image of the original power, a face, a form came down into her heart and made of it its temple and pure abode. But when its feet had touched the quivering bloom, a mighty movement rocked the inner space, as if a world were shaken and found its soul. Out of the inconscient, soulless, mindless night, a flaming serpent rose, released from sleep. It rose billowing its coils and stood erect and climbing mightily, stormily on its way. It touched her centers with its flaming mouth, as if a fiery kiss had broken their sleep. They bloomed and laughed, surcharged with light and bliss. Then at the crown it joined the eternal space. In the flower of the head, in the flower of matter's base, in each divine stronghold and nature's knot, it held together the mystic stream. It held together the mystic stream which joins the viewless summits with the unseen depths. The string of force that make the frail defense, safeguarding us against the enormous world, our lines of self-expression in its vast. Powers and divinities burst flaming forth, each part of the being trembling with delight, lay overwhelmed with tides of happiness, and saw her hand in every circumstance, and felt her touch in every limb and cell. In the country of the lotus of the head, which thinking mind has made its busy space, in the castle of the lotus twixt the brows, whence it shoots the arrows of its sight and will, in the passage of the lotus of the throat, where speech must rise and the expressing mind, and the heart's impulse run towards word and fact, a glad uplift and a new working came. In the kingdom of the lotus of the heart, love chanting its pure hymeneal hymn, made life and body mirrors of sacred joy, and all the emotions gave themselves to God. In the navel lotus, broad imperial range, its proud ambitions and its master lusts were tamed into instruments of a great calm sway to do a work of God on earthly soil. In the narrow nether center's petty parts, its childish game of daily dwarf desires was changed into a sweet and boisterous play, a romp of little gods with life in time. In the deep place where once the serpent slept, there came a grip on matter's giant powers, for large utilities in life's little space. A firm ground was made for heaven's descending might. Behind all reigned her sovereign, deathless soul. This is a vivid description of the opening of the lotuses in the human system and the results that ensue in the working of the mind, life and body with their opening. We have observed that pranayam, the science of breath, mantra, the science of the word, are conjoined to effectuate this awakening of the Kundalini. Necessarily, before the normal human consciousness can rise with this power and merge itself in the superconscient, there has to be concentration. A concentration of the mind. There are many methods of concentration. One is to take a form, a word, or an idea representing the divine, that aspect of the divine which appeals to you, and dwell upon it uninterruptedly. There is a distraction of thoughts. There are two ways of dealing with them. One is to separate yourself and let the thoughts pass without yourself identifying with them, without sanctioning them, but just watching them. Bereft of this sanction, the thought mind runs out and the speed of the thoughts slowly goes down. Another and more strenuous method is to exercise your will and keep out every thought, almost physically, the moment it touches the periphery of your mind. In either way, the aim is to concentrate the mind on growing towards the superconscious. Raja Yoga recognizes that no one can do these mystic operations without a preliminary preparation. That is why this eight-limbed yoga, as systematized, speaks of the first two five-limbed disciplines. They are restraint, they are to prepare the moral and the mental being for with the necessary purification. It consists first of five restraints: not to harm anybody, not only in the physical sense, but not to harm even by the mind, even by emotions like hatred, jealousy, anger. To abstain from untruth, to stick to truth, to think truth, to act the truth, and to speak the truth. Then non-stealing, not only not to steal physically what belongs to another, but even not to mentally appropriate what doesn't really belong to you. There is next celibacy, preservation, and the upliftment of the sex energy. And the fifth, non-greed, not to allow greed to form in oneself at any level. Following this discipline of five restraints, there are five observances. Purity. Purity, you will understand, is not so much physical as psychological. Contentment, not pleasure, but a deep contentment with what God has given and with what you are endowed. Austerity, a massing of the inner forces, focusing on them on the object and galvanizing your all energies towards your aim. Study of scriptures, mystical literature, experiences and realizations of those who have gone before you. Literature written by your teacher or other teachers insofar as it can help you to widen your horizon and worship and adoration of God. Worship not necessarily with external ritual, but the adoration, inner adoration, the adoration of the soul. Adoration is a vast subject which should form the theme of our talks hereafter. So while we are speaking of the eight limbs of this yoga, first is restraint, observance, then posture, asana, which I explained to you, putting the body in such a posture as will enable it to sit immobile without restlessness for whatever amount of time you expect it to sit. Then withdrawal of the mind, withdrawal of the consciousness from 1,000 external preoccupations where it is spread out normally. After withdrawal, fixing it to one particular object, not necessarily physical, maybe subtle, And thereafter, after once the mental energies are focused and fixed for the absorption of the mind in the object, maybe the form of God, idea of God, the word of God, Om maybe. Once it is absorbed and the mind goes on flowing into that, one attains a certain identity and is completely absorbed in it and lost to all outer awareness. This is what is called samadhi, trance, which is a capital step for a complete merger of your consciousness with the divine consciousness. The aim of Raja Yoga is not merely to attain this objective, but also to take cognizance, but it concerns itself also with the various mystic powers that are attainable or are effortlessly attained in the course of this yoga. For, as you know, each level of consciousness, each level of being has its characteristic modes of function. As higher and higher levels of consciousness are opened up above the physical mind, above the material life, new powers come into operation. Whether one consciously evokes these powers and exercises them, as I mentioned to you, the power of lightening the body, making oneself heavy, the power of being in many places at the same time, seeing ahead. There are 8 or 9 powers which are called the accomplishments. Whether they are acquired by effort or whether they manifest by themselves, the true yogi does not make much of them. It is only showmen, pseudo-yogis, who display these powers under whatever plea and try to establish themselves on a superior pedestal. A true seeker, when he becomes aware of these powers, he uses them as he would normally use the other powers, only when he is moved by the inner or the higher will. Sri Aurobindo concludes this section saying that while the broad aims of Hatha Yoga and Raja Yoga have necessarily got to be included in the comprehensive aim of integral yoga, their laborious physical and psychophysical methods need not be adopted, though in the preliminary stages they may be made use of. Some, if they find them useful, may continue to use them, but they can only prepare the seeker for the greater glories of the spirit that are opened by the integral yoga. We have today completed the second part of the synthesis of yoga, the yoga of knowledge. It has taken us nearly a year, and it has been an arduous exercise to follow Sri Aurobindo in his tracing of the line of development of the yoga of knowledge. Now we'll have, from the next session onwards, a lighter, more vivid, more appealing, and more real task in studying his development of the yoga of love. For whoever has come here, whoever has lived under the aegis of the mother, cannot but make, cannot but breathe the vibrations of divine love. How the seeker awakes to the divinity of love, to the power of creative love, how human love transforms itself into divine love, and how love has got its own steps and gradations for the ascent of the human spirit to the highest altitudes of the divine. These are narrated in the next 7 chapters of the way of love. I am told for the next session, but she can be sure that when we study this theme, we'll always have her in our mind. We wish her full success in carrying the impact of the new consciousness that is emerging here to the new continent of Americas, and she will be able to impress upon them that the project here is not so much concerned with the erection of buildings, laying of roads, starting of factories, but with the erection of human dynamos, of the new consciousness, with the utilization of the unimaginable freedom that has been given to the residents, present and future, to link in their consciousness the highest that has been achieved so far by man on the globe, and the newer splendors of the Gnostic world which are waiting at our gates. Any questions?
I was reading last night Seth Prince's article for All India Radio on Sri Arjuna Center, where he was quoting Sri Arjuna saying that when the new creation is about to emerge, there is a recrudescence of all the worst that comes up. I'd like you to say something.
It is true. Sri Aurobindo has always emphasized that when one undertakes to do yoga, which means a change of human nature, elevation of nature, and ultimately even the transformation of nature, all that is to be transformed has to come up. It is an intention in nature that the worst is pushed to the surface, because it is that has to be transformed. The challenge is posed so that the spirit or the power that is at work may face it and not shirk it. Even if it were not a question of the supramental transformation, but a question of transformation of ordinary nature, all the difficulties in that nature precipitate themselves to the surface and call for resolution. That is why the occultists have always said, before the outbreak of light, before the dawn, there is the darkest night. They are there. As our creation has emerged from the inconscient, from the night of inconscience, there are so many knots of that darkness, of that nescience. They have to be resolved. Unless that is done, no further progress is possible. No steps can be taken onwards. That is why nature pushes all the hidden difficulties to the surface in order that they may be first dealt with and progress made really possible. Otherwise, the progress made is very flimsy, and at the first on approach of the neglected difficulties and obscurities, the progress is held up. Both Sri Aurobindo and the mother had always welcomed this exposure of the obscurities and the dark corners of the being. When the yogic effort was taken up in earnest in any individual, they showed great understanding, sympathy, and helped each person. And counseled patience before this preliminary clearing was effected.